Iraqis pour into the streets of Baghdad to support Saddam Hussein. As American Marines move up and dig in, the countdown is short and getting shorter.
They're motivated, they're scared, but they're not scared to the point where they're not going to be able to do their job.
This is NBC Nightly News with Tom Brokaw, reporting tonight from NBC News headquarters in New York.
Good evening. Two men, one in Washington, the other in Baghdad, backed by two mighty military machines, are now in a short countdown to a showdown that seems all but inevitable. NBC's John Cochran is with a man in Washington. John, President Bush, when midnight comes tonight, what does he do?
Tom, there apparently will be no immediate order for an attack. His aides say that at midnight, the president expects to be sound asleep.
President Bush was a study in cool, calm control today, in public at least. Despite the Gulf crisis, Bush met with economic advisors, where he was asked about his mood.
My mood?
How to state it, no question.
I'm waiting to hear from our economic experts and team and independents about what's happening in the economy.
The president was trying hard to show it's just business as usual, but no one in Washington believes that. At a private briefing for senators, Defense Secretary Cheney said he sees no reason to delay an attack. Several senators urged Bush to make one more try at peace, including a face-to-face meeting with Saddam Hussein.
Mr. President, I hope that our president would, before that claw of the eagle unleashes the arrows, hold out the olive branch one more time with a personal phone call to Saddam Hussein. Try to get him to a meeting.
Tonight, UN Secretary General Perez de Cuellar made a final appeal for Iraq to withdraw from Kuwait.
I most sincerely appeal to President Saddam Hussein to turn the course of events away from catastrophe.
French Premier Michel Rocard said the moment for force has arrived. Jordan's King Hussein said a destructive war is about to begin. Egypt's President Mubarak pleaded with Saddam to protect Iraq's children from death. Outside the White House, anti-war protests grew in intensity.
President Bush told clergymen today he is still praying for peace, but tonight, this is a pretty grim place. Tom?
Thank you, John Cochran at the White House. Baghdad Radio reported today that Saddam Hussein visited Iraqi troops in Kuwait. He was quoted as saying, "There will be no compromise." NBC's Tom Aspel is in Baghdad on this day of war fever.
They were organized, they were enthusiastic, and they were everywhere. In Baghdad and in every city in the country, massive demonstrations for Saddam Hussein. There have been many of them since U.S. forces and their allies poured into the region to confront Iraq, but today's were different, because when they got going this morning, there were 20 hours left until the deadline. In crowds like these, emotions rise. People get psyched up, they get brave, and they get ready to go against all odds.
We will fight and fight until our rights stand on our land. I live it in Baghdad, and my family stay in Baghdad. They have it everything in Baghdad. Meat, food, milk.
When the crowds faded away, the streets were practically empty. A few cars, a few people. By mid-afternoon, shops were closed. Nobody was going back to work. Iraqi television showed some civil defense programs for the first time in more than a week. First aid advice mostly. And by sunset, Baghdad was quiet and calm. Baghdad on the last night before the deadline. A lot quieter than usual. A few last-minute preparations, but no outward fear.
The people are putting on a brave front, but they all have private fears for their lives, for the lives of their children, and for the future of their country. Tom Aspel, NBC News, Baghdad.
Now let's go to the Pentagon, the nerve center for one of the largest military forces ever assembled anywhere. NBC's Fred Francis is there tonight with the latest moves by the American strategists, the latest moves and worries. Fred?
Tom, NBC News has learned that for the first time, the Pentagon has moved more than 24 B-52 bombers into the Middle East.
The bombers are now close enough to the war zone to hit Iraqi positions without refueling. Pentagon officials would not identify which country agreed to take the B-52s. Spy satellites have pinpointed as bomber targets virtually every trench, tank, and artillery piece in Kuwait.
Tanks, we estimate the Iraqis have 4,200 tanks. That's up 200 from last Thursday.
Those same satellite photographs produced the Pentagon's weekly assessment of Iraq's strength. Another sign today that war may begin very soon is evidence of U.S. electronic jamming of high radio frequencies in Iraq, the prelude to any air assault. And U.S. intelligence sources say Iraq may decide to use oil as a weapon. Senior administration officials told NBC News that Saddam has 5 fully loaded oil tankers in Kuwait's main port. They expect he'll release tens of millions of gallons of oil from those tankers into the northern Persian Gulf and set it ablaze. For Saddam, that would be temporary protection against marine amphibious landings. Smoke from burning oil would also hamper laser-guided smart bombs, which need clear air to sight targets. More of a problem would be the devastating effect of floating oil on water desalination plants serving U.S. forces in Saudi Arabia.
A desperate Saddam, predicted one source, would destroy all of Kuwait to stop the United States from saving it. Tom?
Thank you very much. Fred Francis at the Pentagon tonight. The matchup for the Allies, more than 680,000 troops. That includes just over 415,000 Americans. For the Iraqis, close to 515,000 on the ground. Brad Willis tonight with the Marines up front.
The 1st Division of the Marine Expeditionary Force digging in on the front lines, using desert sand for bunkers, preparing for trench warfare.
If we don't put these sandbags up here and put the tops on them, that can be part of us getting shrapnel or us not getting shrapnel. So
Difference between life and death.
Yes.
The men are tense, on constant guard now, convinced that bombs will soon begin to fall.
Hopefully we keep bombing until we can step in and basically be a mop-up unit for us troops.
For 5 months, the Marines of Task Force Ripper have been deployed in the desert. Men tired of waiting, now ready, even eager to go to war.
Our men feel like it is going to be a war. We don't feel like we're not going to be a war because we are ready for it. We're ready to go.
They call themselves Task Force Ripper, a force to cut through the lines of Saddam Hussein. Marines on the brink of war, with few illusions about what that conflict might bring.
Everyone has fear, and if they tell you differently, they're lying to you. Everyone has fear.
Today, many eyes in the desert scan the horizon towards the border of Kuwait, waiting for a war these Marines believe is inevitable. With Operation Desert Shield, Brad Willis, Saudi Arabia.
I'll be back in a moment with more on the Persian Gulf, including fears of terrorism at this nation's airports.